For the arrival of COVID and the Spanish flu, Australia was rocked by its very first epidemic. What many believe to be smallpox nearly wiped out the entire Aboriginal population of Sydney, and some now believe it was a colonial act of biological warfare.
Every boat that went down the harbour found them laying dead on the beaches and in the caverns of rocks.
In early 1789, 15 months after the arrival of the First Fleet, a catastrophic epidemic, long identified as smallpox, wiped out anywhere between 60 to 90% of Sydney's Indigenous population.
Devastation could only be one small minor descriptor that would be accurate in terms of having well over half of your population wiped out.
The Yirrapai-Dungari man Nathan Moran says the stories handed down from his ancestors are supported by British accounts.
Documented evidence in the colonial diaries attest that people were being found lying, dying in and around the foreshores. Words to the effect of what was occurring was the devil, the devil.
It came as part of the supplies of the First Fleet. They had smallpox in bottles, and because Australia had been isolated for such a long time, they had no immunity and no experience, so they really were just sitting ducks.
Independent researcher Chris Warren has spent the better part of 20 years trawling through colonial journals and accounts. He believes it was no accident, but rather an act of biological warfare.
The circumstances that we know about point directly to the fact that there'd been a deliberate spread of smallpox, because the Marines actually arrived in the Sydney Cove without any ammunition for their muskets. British had already used smallpox in North America, so it was a tactic that they were well versed in.
Highly deadly, the sudden outbreak spread rapidly, killing thousands of Aboriginal people throughout Sydney, north into the Hawkesbury and as far south as Jervis Bay.
At that time, a native was living with us, and on taking him down to the harbour to look for his former companions, he exclaimed, all dead," and then hung his head in mournful silence.
My take on it is that it was something that may not have even been smallpox. It was certainly a devastating disease, but it's indeterminate whether it really was smallpox.
Narrogoo woman Professor Jacqueline Troy is an anthropologist, linguist and director for Indigenous research at the University of Sydney.
The material that was brought out by the doctors on the First Fleet was for the purpose of inoculating people if something did come up. I don't believe the British brought smallpox out in any form as a deliberate measure to infect Aboriginal people in this colony they were establishing. It wasn't a part of their invasion plan as it was in North America. The plan was actually to conciliate people to this colony and also to communicate this to them, so to learn their languages.
While Chris agrees the early mission was to get the locals on side, as time went on, tensions rose.
Not being able to grow enough food around Sydney Cove and needing to expand the settlement up to Parramatta just made it almost impractical for them to have decent relations. They had a situation where if they hadn't have done something of that nature, they could easily have been wiped out, and they were very concerned about their own safety.
There's little evidence to attest what exactly happened during this time, and we may never know the truth.
I, as a First Nations person, believe it's integral for us to pass on the history, to acknowledge the devastation, the decimation of my people, of First Nations Aboriginal people, in coming into contact with the arrival of the British colony and the effects of colonisation.
Gosh,
so
much
story.
still to understand.
Yeah. And I guess this is what I love about what historians do, right? They throw up these ideas, they contest it. Maybe in 30 years someone will get that breakthrough that allows you to figure out what the truth of what happened here. But it's incredible stuff, isn't it?
But it's also the past, so we may well never know.
Which, that's definitely right.